Today, we have with us Matt Barney, who's joining us from San Francisco or just Bay Area?
Vacaville, next to Napa, Bay Area.
Okay, so even better. You're in the wine end of Silicon Valley,
Right,
like it.
right.
So Matt is a PhD, a coach, an author, and a speaker. He has held senior leadership roles for over 20 years at many multinationals such as AT&T, Motorola, and most recently, he's been at Infosys in India and has actually lived in India, which is quite exciting. He promised me he will not be sharing too much of his Indian humor because of an international audience and it might not go over with everybody, but he knows the Indian culture. So hello to everyone from India, from Matt. Most relevant to our conversation today is Matt's current role as the founder and CEO of LeaderAmp, a high-touch, high-tech platform for expert and artificially intelligent coaching. So, Matt, feel free to jump in with any additional details on your background as we go on, but I kind of want to just jump right into that last bit, your expertise in artificial intelligence. You know, coaching is such a fundamentally people-focused profession. Why AI?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. I'm an organizational psychologist, so I come at this as somebody who really cares about developing people. Most of my career has been spent developing people in classical ways, both teaching and coaching, all the ways this audience would do it. But I also had a twist with technology. And fundamentally, my reason for going down the AI path was because I just couldn't get regular coaching done in the way I really wanted to. So with very senior leaders at Infosys, for example, around the world, many of them would sincerely commit to practicing certain things. So, myself or my team would initiate a relationship just like coaches would. And the client was sincere. We'd do some baseline assessments. They'd commit to practicing. And the next time we met with them, so many times, clients would forget to do anything at all. They got busy, their kid got sick, something happened. And it was just a complete waste. And all the ways we tried to kind of nudge them through email or SMS or calling them were just inelegant. So that was one of the reasons why I was looking for some better way to help clients stay on track with their own goals and also to support them in between sessions when you can't be with them. But another big one, both at Infosys and the other large companies I've been at, I could only afford to do coaching for very, very senior people. At Infosys, we only looked after the top 2,500, and I could show the founders of Infosys that 86% of the leaders would get better every 12 to 18 months. But they'd be like, wonderful, what do we do for the 75,000 middle managers? And I never had a good answer because I could barely scale coaching for very, very senior people. And then, they hired 50,000 people a year at the junior levels. They wanted to know how they coach them too. And I never had a good answer. So the reason for AI is not to replace the human, but to augment and do things we coaches can't do without the technology, to extend our relationship into people's daily lives through their smartphones. And the AI in the current state and the foreseeable future is not as good as the real coach. The real coach, we feel committed to each other in our relationships, not to machines or not to software. But the right kind of AI allows people reminders to practice, suggestions for how they can get better, a safe place to practice certain things. And then the coach can then see all of this and plan, either intervene when they're not together or plan the next one-on-one that they do together. So I'm from the camp of extending coaching to vastly more people. And put this in perspective. The entire International Coach Federation only has about 33,000 members globally. And there are literally hundreds of millions of people who will never, ever get coaching. They can't afford us. And yet, when I was living in India, I'd go home every day and Infosys, I got to do some amazing things, but what do you do? 1.3 billion great Indians or 1.5 billion great Chinese or all over Africa. How do you scale our wonderful personalized approach? You just can't. There aren't enough of us coaches. And even when there are wonderful coaches and clients that can afford us, we can't always help them to the full degree that we'd like to. So that's my argument of why AI.
Okay. So we'll go into actually specifics on how you see AI playing out in coaching, but I actually want to run a little poll with our audience. So everyone on your screen, you should be seeing some options. Please vote in this poll. The question I have is, how do you feel about the role of artificial intelligence in coaching? Please select as many of the answers that apply to you. But I must tell you, when I first heard about this topic, it was quite polarizing to me, and I'm hoping that it's going to be polarizing to our audience so that we can get some interesting debate going. Already we have one comment in our chat, another solution, create a coaching culture. So as the poll is going, I'll leave it on for a couple minutes. Matt, can you maybe talk about the specific applications of artificial intelligence to coaching? I believe you mentioned that your company specifically plays in 4 areas where AI can apply, but if you cover those in addition to any other ones you've heard of.
Sure, and I'll group those 4 into 2 big categories. The first one is client-facing. Basically trying to emulate what a coach could do. It won't be as good as the real coach, right? It won't have the rich context and the perspective and the empathy that we humans can give each other, but it can help nudge people. It can suggest concrete behaviors that they can practice, even if the coach isn't around, and then the coach can see all of this. So the first kind of client-facing AI is a rule-based system which is calibrated just like an assessment instrument. So in other words, we don't want this kind of coaching to be too hard or too easy, but just right in each person's Goldilocks zone. So we don't have a non-swimmer asked to jump into the deep end of the pool or an Olympian to blow bubbles in the children's pool. It's appropriately challenging. And it's also written by a human so that, and ideally somebody that they trust or look up to, like an Elon Musk or a Oprah Winfrey type person, so that there's some excitement or anticipation of what that content is. It is tailored to them. It's written by that person that they might respect, but they're scheduling when they wish to get this and drip it into their life, and then journal about the lessons they've learned from trying to practice that. And that journal, I think, is a very important, elegant window we coaches have into our clients. Rather than like spamming them or calling them or emailing them that might get lost or feel annoying to the client, it's good for clients to reflect on whatever they were doing, on what worked, what didn't work. So it's developmental for them, but it's a clean way where we can know, is this person doing anything at all? So the first kind is this calibrated, rule-based AI. The second kind is based on what many people are now calling deep learning, and in the 90s, they used to call neural nets. It's basically an emulation of what we humans do in our brain, but it's digital. And that means it's got all the normal biases that a Ku Klux Klan teenager might have from growing up with their parents who might be biased. What we do is try and take the best of the computer science with none of that bias and basically emulate. Initially with persuasion, you could just have a flight simulator. You can talk into your phone and get measured on the latest science of persuasion, and then immediately get feedback and try again before you go do it with a real client or a board or a customer or whatever the influence situation is. So the idea is to give people an easy way to get immediate, meaningful feedback, and then store that all so that the coach and the client can work on that same stuff, or if the coach can help that person in between sessions, they can do that. So those are the 2 kind of client-facing, rule-based and deep learning. Then there's 2 other kinds around the content and making it really fast to create either new assessments or the new forms of coaching. And that's really for more technical, geeky experts, but it replaces what I used to do manually just on the assessment side and emphasis. We had blocked about 40 computers in an entire lab with 4 PhDs, and it took us at least a week just to crunch the numbers. We can do that in a fraction of a second now with no PhDs.
So someone's actually asking, is AI interactive? So just to summarize, the AI is, the artificial intelligence is kind of the thing that does the thinking in the back, but what your company does and what any company would need is an application, an interface where a client would then interact with, well, a robot, an artificial intelligence, instead of a human on the back end. Maybe can you just go through a particular example of how an interaction with someone who's being coached would work when
Sure.
working with AI?
Yeah. So, and let me just remind you, I come at this as an extension. The AI is an extension of a relationship, ideally, not a replacement for it. So initially, you have the same kind of coaching initiation that you would in any coaching engagement. And we add to that what we call a behavioral commitment, or like a behavioral contract, where we're clear, this is a private relationship, but your company might want to reserve the right to know if you're doing well so they can praise you, or did the intervention work at the end, so the measurement. But none of the private journaling would be available to them. And similarly, we've flipped the paradigm around 360s. So we think it's really important not to spam people to get good information. Instead, we think it's important inside of our app that people, after talking to stakeholders, saying, Magda, you're somebody I really trust. It would mean a lot to me if you'd help me. I'm really not sure what I'm going to work on. So the first area I might want your help is some feedback. And then on an ongoing basis, I might want your support. Would you mind? It'll take you 5 minutes. And if you think I'm sincere and you don't mind, you'll expect me then if I'm the one sending you the invitation through the app, so that person's accountable for it. The first kind of AI is just scheduling whatever goal they have around either a self-assessed or 360 assessment, scheduling which days they want to practice so that they get a push notification on their mobile device. So if it's something like charisma, it might be to work on telling a story, or using 3-part lists, or modulating your voice, or working on your eye contact. So depending, and it's different. It's really easy things if you're low, and really hard things if you're pretty good. So the first kind is not interactive by design. It's designed to just remind you to practice throughout your day. That's the rule-based system I described. The interactive kind is this deep learning type, where it's like a flight simulator. It's not going to have the rich context where, sometimes in a real coaching situation, you need to provide emotional support, or you need to change, or maybe the client has a crisis that's not really related to the overall engagement, but you kind of need to intervene. Like, the machine can't know all that, and no AI is good enough to flex. But what it's good at, yet, I concede your point. But what it's really good at, once you get it to a certain level, is being available right in the moment when you want some help, where you could just never do this with a real human. And then keeping so immediately, with persuasion, we have a version of this where you can type in or speak into Siri answers to questions the interactive coach is asking you, and it'll tell you how good your answer was. And you can try again and again, as many times as you wish, before doing it in real life. So that interactive one has benefit because it's more like a performance support tool, and it captures that information. And then if your real coach can then use that either in between sessions to send you a mobile push notification about something you're doing well or something you might change. More importantly, the next time you're together, video or in person, you can see where they're doing and what to do next in a much more elegant way than wondering what on earth the client did in between the last session and this session.
So you covered a little bit that the privacy implications, that the client, in this case Infosys, wouldn't know the individual interactions that you have with the person you're coaching. But can you just talk about a little more about the privacy and confidentiality concerns and just implications in general of your app and apps like this?
Yeah, absolutely. We feel like in any coach engagement, forget our technology for a second, there needs to be trust. There needs to be a relationship there so that it can be supportive and the client can have their goals achieved. And so we come at it from a psychological point of view, not just a legal, regulatory, or ethics point of view, around just maintaining the integrity of the relationship and extending it through the technology. So a piece of it up front in the contract, the behavioral agreement, is also signed by the coach. What the coach isn't going to be telling anyone about their private conversations, or showing any of the journal entries, or what stakeholders they might be leveraging as part of the process. We also, we obviously, there's the new European data privacy laws, GDPR. There's and that's a little different in different countries. Like India has a data privacy law around deleting the data after a certain period of time. So we're transparent upfront about, this is a developmental thing. It won't be used against you except insofar as you squander the resource, your company may be disappointed that you're not doing anything with it, and they reserve the right to know if you're not really working with your coach much, or getting better. But short of that, it's not like some of the pre-hire AI you might have seen from HireVue, which I think is much more controversial because it could be very biased, and it's not in your favor to open up your kimono necessarily, whereas this is purely developmental. So I think it's a bit safer to think of AI for development than it is for performance management or selection or those kind of applications.
Okay. There's actually quite a few questions coming in on the chat, but I'm going to post the poll. So I'm going to share the results with everyone right now. So personally, I'm a little surprised that the "it's scary" bit isn't higher because, full disclosure, the second that I saw the topic, my first thought was Terminator, Skynet. And I know this is coaching. We're not talking about, building an artificial intelligence that's going to tell people how to behave. But, you mentioned that the technology isn't there yet to be that malicious, but, it may be in the future. And I guess I was thinking, what's to stop an artificially intelligent being to coach people to do its bidding, and we won't even know because we're being coached. And funnily enough, someone else on the chat has said, as a technologist, I'm excited about AI. As a human or life form, I'm curious of emerging singularity predicted in 2023 and how it will impact human work-life balance.
Absolutely.
Let's comment on that.
I absolutely share your concern wholeheartedly. I have a new chapter coming out in September in the Cambridge Handbook of Technology and Employee Behavior on exactly this topic, because very credible experts in AI that are computer science types are very worried about this. And high-profile people like Elon Musk have funded institutes like OpenAI purely to address this problem. My concern with it is partially because let's take those threats seriously, because even if the singularity doesn't happen, AI can still be dangerous and still hurt people. I mean, it already is. It already is. I mean, Microsoft, embarrassingly, about a year and a half ago, put their Tay chatbot up on Twitter, and in 24 hours, people turned it into a Nazi bot. And
I remember that.
Google had been targeting African Americans as guerrillas. This bias is real because it's emulating what our own bias normally does. So and right now there are real ethical dilemmas that Tesla faces with their autopilot. This isn't some science fiction thing, and it's not self-aware. It's not a singularity, but it's still dangerous. So it's worth talking about, even if we never got to the singularity, which I think is a real threat. So I think your concern is well placed. My solution to this is partially, most of the computer science is more like engineering than it is science. They actually do very, very little to actually understand the psychology of things like, how do we teach our children morality? Well, if we're worried about, Tesla's cars running people over for ethical reasons or unethical reasons, how do we make sure those engineering teams are working effectively to address these complicated issues? All the safety, it's called AI safety in the literature. They often poo-poo social science of the kind we use. And so in this chapter, my argument is, we know a lot about moral reasoning. We know a lot about how to develop it. There's several frameworks. There's more than 50 years of science about how to do that. We also know about teamwork. My dissertation in the 90s was on teams under extreme stress. We also know about creativity and innovation. Why wouldn't we want to apply the social science to these AI teams that are working on AI safety to increase the odds, if we have any chance, of keeping these things safe? And I think that's a huge gaping hole right now that I am concerned about with you. I think, just this week, we had a recent example why people should be worried, even before we get to a singularity. Google had a breathtakingly good demo. For any of you that haven't seen it, Google it. It's on YouTube. Sundar Pichai had two breathtaking calls where their natural language understanding and generation called to make a beauty appointment, and the other one booked a restaurant, table at a restaurant. And the human couldn't tell that it was a machine, and it wasn't just an orderly call. There were a couple of weird twists. And the AI not only sounded like a real human, but it handled it very human-like. You could see exactly where that same technology could easily be used with robocalls, to trick people on a scale that's unimaginable. So even before we get to the singularity, I worry right now about, so my work has none of the bias of those things because, I'm a geeky psychologist and I care about making sure my stuff actually is fair and accurate and does what it claims, and because it's ethical. But so what I think is required is us coach and psychology types need to partner with the computer science types who mean well, and they're making incredible progress. But it's something like World War II and the atomic bomb, right? Like it's only after the second bomb hit that Richard Feynman came to terms with like what he had done and how scary that all was. And, and we still to this day have worries about nuclear disaster. So we can't afford, this is even worse than nuclear war if it gets to the singularity. So I think it's important that we use AI to mitigate those risks, but it requires using the psychology of moral reasoning and teamwork and creativity to solve these safety problems, if that makes sense.
It does. And sorry, yes, Ram? Go.
Before we go deeper into the fears, and I'm sure that fears would be unending, I would like to go more into the motivational aspects of the work that you're doing, which is what interested me. And as a practicing coach, I tried your app and I found it extremely useful at several levels. At the first level, it was something, if I am coaching 10 people at the leadership level in a company, I could now use your tool to expand it to 100, or maybe that 100 into 1,000 and so on, like you were talking about. That was an outstanding advantage that I saw, and when I tested it out, I found it could be possible. The second, it was on mobile. Yes, there could be concerns about privacy and so on. Michael and others have pointed out, fair enough. But those are things which could happen even today at the individual level, how these privacies and ethical laws are being obeyed by individuals and so on and so forth. So one can keep talking about it forever and ever. But very specifically, I found it extremely useful. The third I found very useful was it was asynchronous. And many people have problems with asynchronous, but I found that when the asynchronous is used properly, out of the dimension of actual coaching, and like you said here, in terms of follow-up and so on, that could have tremendous augmenting value to the coaching process itself. And finally, we had Marshall Goldsmith come here and talk about stakeholder coaching concepts in terms of feed-forwards, in terms of expanding the list of stakeholders, how do you stay accountable, etc., which is the most difficult thing. That's what you pointed out in Infosys, and people do not find the time to follow up. So let us just focus for a moment without going too deep into the whole conceptual gambits of artificial intelligence. I would like to term this as digital intelligence. And today, every one of us who's using even the Zoom has to have a certain amount of digital intelligence. If you could sort of explain what Leader App does, as I practiced it, for example, I think it would allay a lot of fears that people have about what they are expressing here, and presumably. And I found it, the reason why I wanted you to be here was to expose coaches to the possibility of using something like Leader Amp in their applications. It could add tremendous value, as I believe it does to me. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate the kind words, and I'm delighted. Let me start with the motivations as you asked, and then I'll talk maybe some more examples. My motivations come at it from like there's so few of us coach types, and so many people, and especially when I was living in India, I literally was thinking about not just Infosys, but the median age in India is something like 25. And, I'd go home every day. I'm like, how do I scale coaching to a country like this? Or I go to China, how do I scale? You just can't. And so that's where, with our traditional approaches. So can we ratchet down a bit some of the touch? I'm not saying erase the human connection at all. I'm saying, can we reduce that, or at least have different business models which allow us to embed our relationship responsibly into people's daily lives? And part of the reason I went mobile is because, as you said, Ram, everybody has cell phones these days. I think at least 5 years ago when I was in my store, even homeless people had Androids. So I was thinking, okay, if I can have a high touch, high tech combination to extend the coaching relationship, a given coach without technology, or maybe just with Zoom, can maybe touch a couple dozen people a year, something like that. I mean, I think now my motivation is I think we can easily make that 10 times more easily with people who are sincere. Now, the less human touch, the worse it will be, but it's still something that we could even make this available for the desperately poor in the developing world. So how does it work? Well, part of the reason I think it can work the way it does is if you do start out with a relationship, there's really somebody that's able to see what I'm up to, my journaling entries. So I'm scheduling it, I choose it. And maybe my schedule changes. I choose when I want the AI to coach me. So that the version that Ram was talking about, it's part of my goals. I want to get better, but maybe I forget, or maybe I'm not sure what I might be able to do. Now, the AI can't know the context of exactly your situation, but neither can your coach. So you could do your best to get a suggestion for a concrete behavior that might really make sense, or support you might go seek from your mentor, or like Ram said, feed forward, where you might ask a stakeholder for a new behavior you might practice today. So there's a variety of things you might do in a given day. Can I remind myself on the days I want to try and do this, and then do my best to apply it and then journal about it? So it's that we know in the persuasion literature, the more commitments, the more public, the more active, voluntary commitments, the more likely people follow through. So if they commit in the behavioral contract before they touch the software, in the software, they're scheduling it, the coach sees when they're making their promises. And if they slip, if they fall off the wagon and forget to practice one day, the AI, well, the coach can see it and nudge them. Oh, I'm worried about you. Are those the right days and times? Do you want to change it up? Do you want to reduce the frequency to make sure it's more important that you practice these things, in a meaningful way than it is to do it like 7 days a week? Because that's maybe too much for most people. So the opportunity for the coach to have a private window into what the client's doing with the AI is part of where I'm coming from, to try and extend that relationship. And then this newer kind that isn't out yet, this interactive kind I was describing, deep learning, is meant to augment that same thing. So you can have the scheduled variety that's this rule-based thing, the kind that Ram liked. And then there's also, well, if I'm going to go practice something, can I do it in a safe place before I go do it? And then my coach can see all of it and compliment me, praise me, suggest things, send me things, or at least at a bare minimum, plan our next one-on-one together in a way that's elegant and based on what I've been up to. In the telepsychiatry literature, in other words, clinical applications of distant psychiatric things, synchronous and asynchronous, there's good evidence that it works with crazy people. And if it works with the crazies, why shouldn't our normal populations at work do just fine?
So it's scalability, but also kind of like micro coaching in the times where you can't have the one-on-one like we're having right now.
Exactly right. That's exactly it.
So I'm curious, are there particular groups or learning preference types that are responding better to this kind of coaching than others?
Yeah, it's a great question. I came at this, before Infosys, I looked after 82 fiduciary boards. Also, I couldn't scale coaching there either, although I could afford it, But, in Northern California, 15 years ago, it was 50 grand for a CEO level coach. And I could only do that for so many of my 82 boards. So initially I was thinking senior leaders, because those are the problems that I faced. But realistically, people that are very happy with their executive coach and it's working brilliantly for them, that are, not as techno savvy as my children are, probably not the best fit with LeaderAmp. Can we help them? Yeah, I built it for that, but I actually think the sweet spot is not in classical executive coaching at all. I think it's kind of all the people that are extremely sincere about wanting a coach, but their company won't pay for one. Mm-hmm. And it's really disrupting the training market. So you think of the coaching market, it's actually quite small compared to the training market. It's less than 10%. Companies will only spend, I think ATD says something like $1,800 a person per year. How do you afford something like that for a coaching engagement other than a minimal kind of engagement? So I think, so it seems to me that our best traction commercially is more with the middle manager types that normally they get training, but they wouldn't get coaching. And then pleasantly, surprisingly, we've actually had interest from actual children and children's camps who are obviously very mobile savvy. And so Camp BizSmart is one of the children's entrepreneurship camps that are using our app. That audience is like, they don't remember a time before the iPhone. So they're very comfortable with this kind of coaching.
Okay. So you use the word disruption, and I kind of hate the word disruption because it has a bit of a negative connotation. But do you think this is maybe just the evolution of where coaching is going? It's, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking, is this the Netflix approach, Netflix for coaching?
I mean, I certainly think, I think we ought to take a serious look at ways we can make our coaching better, whether it's with or without technology, right? The same is true of the pure science of how we might best coach, which might have nothing to do with the technology to deliver our coaching. So I think, yes, I think this has to be a piece of it, because there's just too few of us and it's just too expensive. We're worth a lot, but companies can't afford us in the classical approach purely. And it's also not as effective as it could be. Let me put it this way. If you look at the data, when I came back from India in 2013, more than 80% of Fortune 500 CEOs were extremely unhappy with their succession pipeline. And you know, the tenure of those same CEOs is going down and down. I think at the beginning of my career it was close to 7 years. I think it's down to 3.5, the typical CEO of a Fortune 500. So the need to grow leaders, it can't happen in one engagement, right? To grow a senior CEO board level person, it's going to have to be over years. And companies like Procter and Gamble invest in these coaching kind of things, you know, but on a multi-year, multi-decade basis, but even they don't start coaching till like director on up. So how do we get, you know, desperately poor people or very junior people support in an affordable, scalable way when, you know, when there's only 33,000 of us and literally hundreds of millions of others who will never get our stuff? This is about the only way I can think to do it, is some kind of combination of high touch and high tech.
So when you and I spoke originally, you talked about the implications for diversity audiences as well, and how this could be helpful for companies who have that challenge. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Delighted. In fact, I'm extremely honored. It means I really care about Infosys. They were very good to me. It was a good experience for me, but I'm extremely honored. They've given us a verbal commit to have 6,000 women leaders on our platform in the next few months. Primarily because, first of all, there are some unique barriers women leaders may face in the workplace, particularly in India, more so than in other countries, around maybe gender roles or family expectations about who does what to raise the kids. And although Infosys at the beginning, and many companies in India would have this too, have, you know, roughly 50-50 engineer women and men engineers, it drops off dramatically as they get older or as they get promoted or they get married and this kind of thing. So I think this kind of coaching is an obvious solution to normal development that women and men need, but it's also, I think, especially good for underrepresented folks, not just women, but people of color or a unique situation where they need help finessing that along with their skill. And, you know, the literature is clear that, if I just stick with women for a second, and I'm not trying to restrict this comment to just women, but, you know, there are fewer things that women are allowed to do or socially acceptable to do in terms of leader behaviors than guys. And that's not fair, but how does a woman finesse that in a way that makes sense for her? And each woman, just like each man, is a little different. So how do we tailor the kind of approach we help her in terms of achieving her goals? And I think the same is true. So I grew up in a very unusual family. My siblings are all African-American, Native American, Hispanic. I'm the only non-person of color in my sibling group, and I'm the eldest. So I grew up in a very unusual situation. I'm married to an Indian. That's how I was able to be in India.
You speak Polish, kind of?
Not well. My Indian language skills are much better than my Polish, but I've grown up around diversity, and you know, there are many different camera angles to this that are probably best dealt with in a helping relationship one-on-one, where, you know, the group dynamics in a class, diversity training, the beginning of it in the US was a disaster. It actually made people more racist and sexist than ever before. So if we're going to help underrepresented folks of any stripe, it's just obvious that people are going to be better off with individualized help on those specialty diversity topics that each individual might have a little different for him or herself. You know, for me in India, and I was the one lone weirdo American out of a sea of Infosys people in India that were all Indian. And like, actually the Indian stuff was relatively easy for me, but what was hard for me was the Infosys culture. A lot of weird stuff. I mean, most of the people, my boss is a billionaire. He was the chairman of the company. Most of them were worth, you know, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And they wanted a coach like they wanted their Lamborghini or their Rolex, but they didn't want to drive their Lamborghini every day. They didn't want to use their coach. So it was like politically delicate for the weirdo American to finesse. It wasn't like I expected a lot of the unusual things because I'd spent a lot of time in India, being married to an Indian for 20 years, but I had a mentor that basically played, and he coached me and he mentored me, who knew how to finesse all this with the founders and with the rest of these relationships. But without that, I don't know that I would have survived. So it's I'm coming at it from that point of view. I was a tiny minority. And for some crazy, in India, I was always dusted off as the diversity guy when my wife's actually more of an expert on this topic than I, but because she was Indian in India, they think the weird American has more knowledge on it. So if that makes sense, that's kind of how I think about it.
Okay. Just FYI, everyone, we still have some time. So if you want to ask your questions live, please go ahead. Matt, there's echoing concern about the privacy issues, and when things get hacked, if one coach is compromised, that's very little being spilled. Whereas when an app like this is compromised, there's big risk.
Yeah, it's a fair concern. And it's the same concern you'd have with any of the other software out there, right? Where they try their best to, how many software companies have gotten hacked? So it is a legitimate concern. We're doing our best to comply with things like there's certain military grade, bank grade encryption standards we try to adopt. The GDPR, the new global data privacy law in Europe. Australia and India have actually more stringent standards than even the Europeans. And Saudi Arabia is actually among the most difficult because it's not just about hacking. You can't even have the data outside of their country. Germany, I think, has the same thing. You must have servers in their country. And so, or the data in their country. So yes, there are ethical and legal issues, and there are technical constraints. And it's, most of the tech multinationals are doing their best to address it, but even they haven't completely solved this problem. I think a partial long-term solution to this is more decentralization, in the same way that modern coaching, the point that was just made, today without the AI, I get hacked. It's only me and my clients. It's not everybody on the platform. Well, for those of you familiar with the blockchain, it's the technology side of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. And when everybody controls their own data with their own private key, that's much, much tougher to hack. And I think these decentralized data structures are probably the long-term better approach. But it's also just doesn't scale right now. It's too bleeding edge to do everything on the blockchain in terms of storing these sensitive data.
So speaking of where things will go, so someone just asked, coaching has unique qualities versus training and development. How do we approach AI in coaching and keep the unique qualities, not have it become just another training tool?
Yeah. I think my solution to this, I call nano learning or embedded learning. There's a whole movement in the learning management system that usually are more training people, not us coaching people, where they're used to, kind of scaling courses and they just want to drip it into your mobile device. I think that's a mistake. I think there's a place in this world for formal classes. And then it's all about how do you get people to practice and embed it into their daily life, make it a habit so that they get their goals achieved. And almost every training person would tell you that's like where everybody fails in training, where classic Kirkpatrick, they would say only 10% of training transfers to the job. So I think the paradigm needs to change from that, coaching being something separate from training and blurring them together, where it's very client centric. So let me give you some examples. When I lived in Chicago, I ran Six Sigma globally for Motorola. And the way that was traditionally taught had 1 week of training across 4 months, where the week was classroom and 3 weeks was coaching and application. Really tough to scale also, but it worked. It drove $3 billion of improvement with something called Digital Six Sigma. Well, how do you blur the line? Like, just because everyone's in the same class doesn't mean they even need the same things. And same thing with the coaching. Like if the coach is with you, wonderful to coach you on whatever you need. But in that situation, it's really intensive and it's a group kind of thing, and they kind of coach you as they can. It's not like an executive coaching one-on-one relationship. So I think the solution is to blur the lines between classes and coaching and but tie it all together with goals and models of human cognition, skills, and behavior. So that we're engineering people in a way that's consistent with their goals, but it's practical and it's embedded into their daily life, which is what training usually fails to do. They might have a wonderful class and you like it, but you often fail to apply it later. And that's where coaching is better. So I think that the approach, if you look at modern human resource information systems, they often will try to have a holistic integrated talent management system, but they usually don't have a great way of dripping learning into people's lives. Some of those belong in a like flipped classroom. Some of them might belong in a one-on-one classroom. Others belong in coaching. Why not? So I like to think of this as recipes, where some of it belongs in this formal stuff, some of it belongs in informal. What's the right recipe? And the answer to the recipe might be different depending on what we're coaching.
Okay. It sounds like you've worked with groups and then within those groups, individual coaching. Have you worked with groups of people in the AI platform as well?
Yeah, actually our very, very first deployment of LeaderAmp was with a group coaching. It wasn't with one-on-one. And we had people, two people in India, a person in Thailand, a person in the Netherlands, a person in Colorado. And so we tried to both tap into support that they could give each other. So at that point, we're very new. I mean, we're still in beta. So we had the groups be able to have a private LinkedIn forum where they could support each other, and to encourage their support of each other, we would say whichever topic they want to propose for the next group coaching session, is only going to come from the most recent, the first come, first serve on the LinkedIn forum. So what happened with the group coaching was we had them go through the self-assessments, they picked their goals, they would support each other on LinkedIn, and we would address the group coaching topics that people would want, and sometimes toggle into training. It actually modulated between training and coaching as the situation required. And then of course, privately behind the scenes, you can give more individualized support through the app to individuals. Now, the challenge with group coaching, of course, is you got all the group dynamics that you don't have in one-on-one, where bashful people don't want to speak up, or people don't come, and then they want to they want to see a recorded session or something. Or it's a topic that some people want, but not others. In the one-on-one, you don't have this issue. And so that's kind of why we ended up toggling between the two and had some asynchronous bulletin board type support, as well as the mobile. Now, in that very first session, we had a couple people that would kind of come to the synchronous sessions and not do much else. And others were like literally practicing 7 days a week. So obviously the ones practicing like an Olympian got incredibly better. The ones that didn't even come to the coaching, we can't perform miracles, just like in a regular coaching engagement. You can't force a client to get better if they don't want to do anything. So that's what stimulated. It annoyed me that some of the people squandered it. So we came up with what I call a time trial now, and we'll do this with Infosys, we've done it around the world with several companies. We say, look, before you invest in a valuable coach, the human, we'll let a large group of people try the AI, convince a bunch of people to help them, but they gotta show us that they're serious about practicing the AI before they win access to the coach, because we have scarce resources. So it allows a large company to say tens of thousands of people can use the AI for 3 weeks, convince people to help them. Only the ones that journal like an Olympian actually win access to the coach. So you position the coach as this prize, this very valuable thing, but you got to earn the right to it. And we have a couple of companies now who have this as a regular, once a quarter, they do a time trial so that people can have the chance, if they failed to practice as much as their colleagues, they can try again next quarter.
Okay, so I was actually going to ask you about motivating people using the app, because I know personally, just my phone is filled with so much. And as a person who's been working, in technology my entire career in some way or another, the fact that I'm kind of over it a little bit tells you something. So it's interesting how, you're motivating people with the reward of use the AI features to get to, the real coach, so to speak.
We have one other one too. So there's the whole gamification area of software, and there's some social science called self-determination theory. We have a leaderboard on this too. So that's another one where I'm competing based on either my how good I am at practicing, how serious I am at keeping my word about practicing, or I told you about Camp BizSmart. We have children competing on who's the best team member. Every day at the end of their camp, they do a quick 360, computer adaptive, so it's very short. And the leaderboard updates on who's the most collaborative, who's the most helpful.
Oh, cool. That's interesting. So I have a couple practical questions. A few people have requested a demo of your app, and I know that I asked that too when we first met. Just checking, that's not possible this second.
Right this second, but you can reach out to me and we can
Okay.
give you more.
All right, so I've shared the Matt's website on the chat. I'll also make sure that it's on the blog post, but Matt, just let me know later if there's anything else I can share on how to reach you. So someone also asked if you give training on how to use this app, or on artificial intelligence for coaches.
We only certify coaches on it. We're not trying to be competing with those of you that certify train coaches from scratch. We're taking existing coaches and helping them extend their relationship through the technology. And maybe if they're not familiar with 18 areas of the science, if they're not familiar with some of that, they get really strong with the science and leveraging the technology. So it's a flipped classroom kind of model where they do self-paced videos and then they do synchronous sessions like this with me. Okay.
So kind of looking back at the poll from the beginning of our session, 68% people said the possibilities are exciting. And 47 agree with you that it complements what real coaches do. On the kind of business side of coaching, and many of the coaches on the call today, they're individual coaches, have their own business. They aren't part of the organization. Do you think apps like yours are a critical component of being competitive as a coach in terms of the business of running a coaching business?
That's absolutely one of my goals. I mean, one of my motivations is to help people like you just described, Magda, scale their business. Think of the clients that love you the best and renew their contracts, but they could never afford you for their direct reports. Like, that's who we're trying to help. Not change. You could keep that exact same coaching model with the clients that love you, but then offer a different kind of coaching, less of your time, in a responsible way. You could even have more junior people, that you're mentoring with this high touch, high tech approach, responsibly, because the AI is good. It's not as good as you are, but it's a responsible way to help people practice, where you can reduce the time and therefore you can reduce the price points you can charge. So we can easily, 4 to 5 times more clients than you could ever do by yourself. And many coaches are doing this because they absolutely love coaching, because they like the relational component. They're a little scared maybe that the AI is going to take that away. We're not saying take it away completely. We're saying give yourself some more degrees of freedom of different options. You can keep the same options you've always had and add these new ones where you reduce your touch time, but you've got an ability to scale it like you never could without the technology.
Okay, so it sounds like this could be a way to augment coaching relationships, but also to enrich them to a larger audience. It sounds super interesting. I guess my big question is, so do you think this approach and just technology that we're seeing in general, BetterUp, for example, where it's short bursts of one-on-one video coaching, do you think that the role of coach is fundamentally changing or will change in the very near future?
I think it's always been changing, right? I mean, the beginning of my career, it seemed like coaching was what you did for the technically savvy exec that nobody could get along with, that you're about to fire, right? And too often, that's some companies still have this. I talked to IBM recently. They said they still have that impression of coaching, but the more enlightened ones use it as an investment, and that's a good change. So I just think this, the use of paper and pencil assessments in coaching were replaced by computer-based, which were replaced by computer adaptive. So I see this as just a normal evolution of the science and technology. And, I come at this not as a technologist really, but as a psychologist trying to get clients better and trying to disrupt training, which I think is frankly overinvested in compared to coaching. Coaching is probably a lot more effective, but most of the money goes to training that actually doesn't help many people. So that's what I'm trying to do, if that makes sense.
I think Ram has a question.
Following up on what Magda asked you earlier and what you answered, someone asked earlier about saying that creating a culture of coaching in an organization is probably an answer to AI. I would think of AI being an extremely powerful tool to be able to enable this coaching culture. And that is really what I was trying to do when we talked. I had exactly the kind of situations. I was working with about 10 or 20 leadership team. And they in turn wanted to propagate that culture down the organization, and they had another 200 and they would have so on. And I found this to be an excellent medium to enable those people whom I train in coaching skills, who in turn, and they probably didn't get credentialed or anything, whatever, that was not what they were interested in. But in terms of giving feedback, in terms of how to communicate, how to ask, not to tell, etc., all these are competencies of coaching. And how can they then follow up with those people downstream? And perhaps then somebody asked this question about supervision, I can act as a supervisor to be able to monitor that conversation. And I surely agree that there are issues of privacy there and so on. And would we be able to scale that cultural change in an organization, which is what more and more companies are working at. And I think that's what you're really trying to do. I just wanted to be sure that was what you think about.
Yeah, I appreciate the point you're making, Ram. We had a request for exactly what you described with Shell. They're going through a grassroots cultural transformation, and cultural change is among the more difficult kind in OD, and especially when it's global and transnational and large. And so, our approach could potentially allow them not only to see who's doing well with the new behaviors and make them into heroes and role models, but also do experiments where it's not working in a way you just can't with normal OD interventions. So I utterly agree. And I also think that creating a coaching culture is the perfect way to do coaching around certain norms that are wonderful, like Google's orientation toward an evidence-based approach, or when I worked at Merck, it's truly an ethical company, and the culture of what it means to show up as an ethical, kind of person. I think that's ideal. I also think there's a place in this world, borrowed from sports psychology, for what might be a bit sacrilegious to some coaches, but giving advice at times. Like, there is good science on persuasion, on charisma, on formulating a winning strategy. And if your client needs help in one of those areas, just everybody in your company may be great for coaching you on culturally appropriate behaviors, but may not be experts on those things. And sometimes clients need help on those particular things. And I think it's also a good thing to offer that sort of thing when it makes sense for the client's goals in a responsible way. So I think, yes, I think there's the OD sense of coaching and scaling it with tech. And there's the individual sense where I think AI is the better solution than a coaching culture when it's a point solution, like I need my sales team to get better at persuasion, or I need my leaders to have better winning strategies that are differentiated from the competition. There's facts basically to that, where you need the human coach that knows something about those facts and the AI to also complement it together.
So actually someone commented as you were talking that they've used a kind of AI to build trust and inspire their organization to show to code towards coaching and showing improvement in terms of stakeholder feedback. So maybe, we're wrapping up in about 5 minutes. Maybe you could finish up with a few examples of where you've seen success, maybe share some specific results to inspire us, to show us how AI can be helpful.
Sure. So, let me give you one example. In the US, there are 30,000 fire leaders that are quitting their jobs, and there's not a lot of people wanting to be the fire chief. And in California, where I live, fires are a real problem. It's a life and death issue. My kid's school was closed down last year because we had fires in Napa, and it smelled like a fireplace here. So these are heroes. These are Boy and Girl Scouts that are really doing the right thing, but it's hard to scale. They're price sensitive. They can't afford normal executive coaching rates, and the scale is 30,000 people just at the chief level, not even mentioning the junior levels that need to be filled. So one of our early pilots there was with the Menlo Park Fire Protection District in Silicon Valley, where Facebook is headquartered. Now, they're the pioneers of drones, using drone technology for fires, both with the heat seeking, with search and rescue, a lot of cool things that are game changers for fire and rescue people, safety people. But they don't have endless money because they're a government entity. So they really needed to persuade Facebook to give them some more money for their drone program. And so we coached one of the leaders. He originally thought he needed to be more inspirational. So he picked charisma, and his baseline was pretty good. His colleagues, these are people that live with their coworkers for days, years and years together, and go home, 3 and 4 days out of the week. But their stakeholders, they had like 25 stakeholders, which we normally don't have that many, who rated them pretty proficient, but they wanted to get even better. So what that person would do was record his like pitches about drones and how exciting they are to kids, to schools, or to Zuckerberg, and record it on, and send a link to his videos through the LeaderAmp app, in addition to practicing the artificially intelligent coaching and journaling about it. And then the coach would then, say, oh, you did XYZ well, you did these other things not so well, let's work on that next time we're together. And it turned out that it was actually just managing his nerves was half his battle, because he was a great storyteller. And it's an exciting, life-saving stories that he's telling. But, half the coaching was around, practicing, getting prepared, coping with stress, more cognitive behavioral therapy type stuff than it was actual charisma behaviors, which he was damn good at. And he got 2 full levels better by his colleagues' own recognition of his behavior, which to me is the cleanest measure of coaching. Not just did the client love you, which we all want, did other people notice your client measurably better in a fair and accurate way, even if it's a different group of people. So we baselined him and we calibrate everyone. So we remove their bias at the end, even if, some people get hurt in the fire service, somebody else quits or goes on maternity leave. How do you make sure before and after coaching are fair comparisons? So these are examples where having the person record their behaviors in between sessions and then send it to the coach could coach them on that and then plan the next session, and then him practicing more and more and getting comfortable. They did get funded by Facebook, by the way, for the drone program. So that's one example that I could give you.
That's fascinating. It sounds like it's also a good way to really show the ROI of coaching, and really make it a practical, make it practical, I suppose, to whoever is paying the bills.
Right.
No, it's very cool. You mentioned drones, which is a whole different session that we can talk about the implications of drone usage. But look, I hope that this session was a bit polarizing. I did try to make it a bit in the beginning because I think it's a fascinating topic, and it's something, as you said, it's something that's evolving. AI isn't replacing coaches anytime soon. So anyone who had those fears, I hope that you don't have them anymore. But it sounds like it's a powerful tool to supplement and enable what coaches do, and helps them do it at scale in a meaningful way that they couldn't before. So personally, I feel encouraged and excited to follow your work and your company's work. I will definitely post links to your company on the blog post when I post the video. Anyone who has additional questions for Matt, either hold off until I post the blog post or just email me. I'm sure from the comments, there seems to be very polarizing opinions on the topic. So that's great. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And thank you everyone who attended. Any closing words from Ram or from Matt?
No, it was inspiring, Matt. Absolutely fantastic. I remember the time that we talked together at Berkeley to take this forward, and I'm really glad that you are here to explain to people. Leave you to close with any other remarks that you have.
No, I think the world is a better place thanks to coaching, and our clients benefit from us. My goal is, how do we get it to more people, exponentially more people? And I think technology is the only way to do that.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Matt.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, thank you so much for attending. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow for our last 2 sessions. If not, it was great having you today and all week long. Thanks very much. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.